My name is Nathan Reed, and until 6 months ago I thought I had a pretty ordinary life. A decent job at a construction firm, a cozy house on the edge of town, and a wife I'd been with for 8 years, Elena Harper. We weren't perfect, but we'd built something together, or so I thought. That illusion shattered one chilly October evening when everything I knew about her turned upside down. It wasn't a slow unraveling. There were no subtle hints I could point to in hindsight. No, this hit me like a freight train, and by the time it was over, I wasn't the same man I'd been when the night began. I was sprawled on the couch that evening, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the coffee table, scrolling through my phone. Work had been brutal, a new project deadline had me pulling overtime, and I just wanted to unwind. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Elena had texted earlier saying she'd be late, some vague excuse about a work thing at the advertising agency where she was a junior exec. I didn't think much of it. She'd been pulling late nights for months, and I'd gotten used to the rhythm of her absence. Maybe I should have questioned it more, but I trusted her. That was my first mistake. The front door exploded open at 9:47 p.m., the crash so loud it jolted me upright, whiskey splashing onto my shirt. Before I could process it, Elena stormed in, her heels clicking against the hardwood like gunfire. Behind her trailed a man I didn't recognize, tall, wiry, with a buzz cut and a leather jacket that screamed trouble. But what stopped my heart wasn't their entrance or the smug grins plastered on their faces. It was the gun in his hand, glinting under the living room lights, and the stack of cash Elena clutched like a trophy. My cash. The emergency stash I kept in a locked box under the floorboards in our bedroom. Well, look who's home, Elena said, her voice sharp and mocking, nothing like the soft tone I'd fallen for years ago. She tossed her dark hair over her shoulder, her green eyes glinting with something vicious. Didn't expect us, did you, Nathan? I stared at her, my mind racing to catch up. This wasn't my wife, not the woman who'd laughed with me over burnt dinners or curled up beside me during late-night movies. This was a stranger, draped over this thug like he was her lifeline. The guy, later I'd learn his name was Vince, stepped forward, waving the pistol with a cocky smirk. Guess what, buddy? We're taking it all. Your money, your house, your whole damn life. You're too stupid to even see it coming. Elena laughed, a cruel high-pitched sound that cut deeper than the gun barrel pointed at my chest. You really thought I'd stay with you forever? A dull, predictable nobody? I need more, Nathan. I deserve more. She leaned into Vince, her hand sliding up his arm. He's what I need, a real man. I should have been terrified. A sane person would have begged or panicked with a gun in their face. But as their words sank in, something else took over. Not fear, not even anger yet, but a strange, cold clarity. They thought they had me pinned, helpless. They had no idea I'd been waiting for this moment, not exactly like this, but close enough. I leaned back against the couch cushions, folding my arms, a faint smirk tugging at my lips. You sure about that? Vince's grin faltered, his grip on the gun tightening. What's so funny, asshole? You think this is a game? His voice cracked, betraying the bravado he was trying to sell. Elena's eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease crossing her face, but she quickly masked it, waving the cash in my direction. You're done, Nathan. This is mine now. We're out of here and you're left with nothing. I locked eyes with her, my smirk widening. You two are adorable. You really think you've got this all figured out, don't you? I stood up slowly, hands raised to show I wasn't reaching for anything, though the gun stayed trained on me. That cash? It's not what you think it is. You've just walked into something way bigger than your little Bonnie and Clyde fantasy. Elena's smugness wavered, her brows knitting together. What the hell are you talking about? Vince took a step closer, jabbing the gun toward me. Shut up and sit down or I'll blow your head off. I didn't flinch. Go ahead, Vince. Pull the trigger. See what happens. His name slipped out. I'd heard her mention him once, months back, some colleague she'd brushed off. His eyes widened, but before he could react, a loud thud echoed from the back of the house. 3 sharp bangs like someone, or something, pounding on the rear door. The color drained from Elena's face. Vince spun toward the sound, gun trembling slightly. Who the fuck is that? I tilted my head, my voice calm and mocking. Maybe you should find out. Another set of knocks rattled the house, heavier this time, shaking the walls. Elena stepped back, clutching the cash tighter, her bravado crumbling. Nathan, what did you do? I didn't answer, letting the tension coil around them like a noose. The truth was I'd been onto Elena for months. The late nights, the new perfume, the way she'd lock her phone and snap if I got too close. It all added up. I wasn't as clueless as she thought. I'd started digging, tracking her patterns, even hiring a guy named Rico, a PI with a shady past, to tail her. Rico confirmed what I'd feared. She was screwing around with Vince, some lowlife she'd met through a client. But it wasn't just an affair. They'd been planning to clean me out, take the cash I'd saved from years of overtime and side jobs, about $20,000, and run. What they didn't know was that I'd turned their greed into my weapon. The banging grew louder, and Vince, trying to regain control, stormed toward the back door, gun raised. "I'll handle this," he muttered, though his voice shook. Elena grabbed his arm, panic creeping in. "Don't. What if it's—" She didn't finish. The moment Vince disappeared into the hallway, shouts erupted, deep, guttural yells followed by the sound of a scuffle. Something heavy hit the floor with a thud. Elena's hands trembled, the cash slipping slightly from her grip. "Nathan, what's happening?" I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "You wanted excitement, Elena? Here it is." Before she could respond, 3 men strode into the living room from the hallway, dragging a battered Vince behind them. He was barely conscious, blood trickling from his nose, the gun nowhere in sight. The leader of the trio, a broad-shouldered guy with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek, grinned at me like we were old pals. "Evening, Nathan. Looks like we got here just in time." Elena's jaw dropped, her eyes darting between me and the men. Who are they?" Her voice cracked, all traces of arrogance gone. "Meet Carlos," I said, nodding toward the scarred guy. "And his friends? They're here for their money." I paused, letting the words sink in. "The money you thought was yours." Vince groaned as Carlos's men dropped him onto the floor, his leather jacket torn. Carlos cracked his knuckles, his grin widening as he eyed Elena. "You've got sticky fingers, lady. That cash? It's ours. Nathan here was just holding it for us." Elena's face twisted in confusion and fear. "What? Nathan, what the hell is he talking about?" I crossed my arms, savoring the moment. "Here's the thing, sweetheart. That $20,000? I moved my real savings months ago. Bank account, safe deposit box, all locked up tight. What you found under the floorboards. That's a little side gig I've been running with Carlos here. Call it a loan, a very high-interest one. You just stole from some very impatient people." Carlos chuckled, a dark, rumbling sound. "And we don't like thieves. Especially sloppy ones." He stepped toward Elena, towering over her. "You and your boyfriend thought you'd waltz in, take what's ours, and skip town? Cute." Vince tried to speak, his voice slurred. "We didn't know. Look, we'll give it back, okay? Just let us go." He scrambled to his knees, desperation in his eyes. Elena nodded frantically, shoving the cash toward Carlos. "Take it. We don't want it." Carlos didn't move to take it. Instead, he glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "What do you say, Nathan? They're begging now. You feeling generous?" I looked at Elena, her mascara streaking down her cheeks, her hands shaking. For a split second, I remembered the woman she used to be, the one who'd cried in my arms when her mom passed, who danced with me in the kitchen to old jazz records. But that woman was gone, replaced by this greedy, ruthless shell. "No," I said flatly. "They made their choice." Carlos nodded, motioning to his men. "You heard him." They grabbed Vince again, hauling him toward the door. He kicked and shouted, but it was useless. Carlos's crew didn't mess around. Elena sank to the floor, sobbing. "Nathan, please. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this. I was stupid, okay? I'll do anything." I crouched down, meeting her gaze. "You know what's funny, Elena? I saw this coming. The lies, the sneaking around, I knew you were screwing me over. So I planned for it. You thought I was boring? Predictable? Well, how's this for excitement?" I stood up, brushing my hands off like I was done with a chore. "Get out of my house. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges, or letting Carlos take you too." She stared at me, tears streaming, then scrambled to her feet, clutching her purse. "You set me up," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You bastard." "Call it what you want," I said, shrugging. "You walked into it." Carlos's men returned, sans Vince, and stood by the door waiting. Elena stumbled out, her heels catching on the rug, her sobs echoing as the door slammed shut behind her. The silence that followed was heavy, but it felt right, like the end of a storm. Carlos clapped me on the shoulder, his grin back in full force. "You're a cold one, Nathan. I like it. We took care of the punk. Won't see him around here again. You good?" "Yeah," I said, exhaling slowly. "Thanks for the backup." "Anytime, man. You ever need us, you know the number." He and his crew left, their footsteps fading into the night. I sank onto the couch, the whiskey bottle still within reach. The house was mine again, quiet, empty, but mine. I'd won, hadn't I? Elena was gone, Vince was out of the picture, and the cash was safe with Carlos. So why did I feel like I'd lost something too? The next few hours were a blur. I didn't sleep, just sat there replaying the night in my head. Elena's betrayal had been a slow burn, but I'd ignored the smoke until it was a full-on blaze. The late nights, the new clothes, the way she'd pull away when I tried to touch her, I'd seen it all but convinced myself it was nothing. Rico's reports had confirmed it. Vince wasn't just some fling. They'd been plotting this for weeks, maybe longer. She'd even scoped out the floorboards one night when she thought I was asleep, her flashlight flickering under the bedroom door. I'd let her think she was winning, feeding her the bait, $20,000 in marked bills I'd borrowed from Carlos, a guy I'd met through a shady job site deal years back. He'd agreed to play along for a cut, and tonight it paid off. My phone buzzed around midnight, snapping me out of my haze. Elena's name lit up the screen. I almost ignored it, but curiosity, or maybe masochism, made me answer. "What do you want?" Her voice was a wreck, shaky and raw. "Nathan, please, I'm sorry. I messed up, okay? Vince, he's gone crazy. He's talking about coming back, getting even. I didn't know he'd do this. I swear I didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You didn't mean it? You barged in here with a gun, Elena. You tried to rob me blind and leave me for dead. Save your tears, I'm done." "Listen to me," she pleaded, her voice rising. "He's dangerous, he's not letting this go. You don't know what he's capable of." "He's Carlos's problem now," I said coldly. "You picked him. Deal with it." I hung up, tossing the phone aside. She was scared, good. Let her feel the weight of her choices. I wasn't her savior anymore. But her words stuck with me, gnawing at the edges of my calm. Vince wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he was reckless, desperate enough to try something stupid. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, the night air biting at my skin. The street was quiet, the stars sharp against the black sky. I needed to clear my head, shake off the lingering adrenaline. That's when my phone buzzed again, not Elena this time, but an unknown number. The text was short, chilling. "You should have listened to her. He's not done." I froze, my heart kicking into overdrive. Before I could respond, another message followed. "Watch your back. He's got help now." Headlights flared at the end of the street, a car barreling toward my house. Instinct took over. I bolted back inside, locking the door, my mind racing. My gun, a .38 I kept in a drawer for emergencies, was upstairs. I sprinted for it, grabbing it from the nightstand just as a crash splintered the front door. Wood shards flew inward, and there he was, Vince, wild-eyed, a crowbar swinging in his hand. No gun this time, but the look on his face was feral, unhinged. "You think you're smart, huh?" he snarled, stepping over the wreckage. "Sending your goons after me? I'm not done with you." I aimed the gun, my hands steady despite the chaos. "Get out, Vince. Last warning." He laughed, a jagged, broken sound. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't over. You took everything from me, her, the money, I'm taking it back." He lunged, crowbar raised. I fired, a warning shot clipping the wall beside him. The noise was deafening, and it stopped him cold, his eyes widening in shock. "Next one's in you," I said, my voice ice. "Leave." For a moment he wavered, the crowbar trembling in his grip. Then he backed off, spitting curses as he stumbled out into the night. I stood there, gun still raised, until his footsteps faded. But I knew it wasn't the end. Elena's call, the texts, something bigger was coming. I dialed Carlos, my voice tight. "Vince just kicked my door in. Elena says he's got help, some guy named Marco. You know him?" Carlos's tone darkened. "Marco? Shit, Nathan, that's bad news. He's a cleaner, doesn't mess around. If Vince hooked up with him, you've got a problem." "Get here," I said. "Now. On my way. Stay sharp." He hung up and I paced, the gun heavy in my hand. The house felt like a cage, every shadow a threat. Minutes dragged like hours, my nerves fraying with each tick of the clock. Then headlights swept across the windows again, not Carlos's truck but a sleek black sedan. Two figures stepped out, Vince, disheveled and twitchy, and a taller man, calm and deliberate. Marco. Even from a distance, he radiated danger, his movements precise, like a predator stalking prey. The door was already busted, so they walked right in. Vince grinned, manic. "Told you I'd be back, asshole." Marco said nothing, his eyes scanning me, the gun, the room, calculating. He didn't carry a weapon I could see, but he didn't need to. His presence was enough. "You've got guts," Marco said finally, his voice smooth and low. "But guts don't win fights like this. Drop the gun, Nathan. Let's make it quick." I kept it aimed at him. "Not happening. You're in my house." He smiled, a thin, chilling curve. "Not for long." He stepped forward and I fired, 2 shots chest high. But he was fast, diving aside, the bullets burying into the wall. He tackled me before I could adjust, his strength overwhelming. The gun skidded across the floor as he pinned me, his hand clamping around my throat. "You're not cut out for this," he hissed, his breath hot against my face. Vince cackled, circling us. "Told you he's weak. Finish him." But before Marco could tighten his grip, a roar filled the room, Carlos's truck crashing through what was left of my front porch. He burst in, shotgun raised, his crew behind him. "Drop him, Marco." Marco froze, his eyes flicking to Carlos. For the first time I saw uncertainty in them. "This isn't your fight," he said, his voice still calm. "It is now," Carlos growled. "Let him go or you're done." A tense beat passed, then Marco released me, standing slowly, hands raised. Vince panicked, lunging for my gun, but one of Carlos's men tackled him, pinning him to the floor. Marco glared at me, a promise of retribution in his stare. "This isn't over," he said, then turned and walked out, leaving Vince thrashing and cursing. Carlos helped me up, his grip firm. "You okay?" "Yeah," I rasped, rubbing my throat. "Thanks." He nodded, grim. "Marco's not gone for good. You've got a war on your hands now." I looked at the wreckage of my home, splintered wood, shattered glass, Vince still pinned and snarling. "Let him come," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm not running." The next few days were a haze of repairs and planning. Carlos stayed close, his crew fortifying the house. New locks, steel reinforcements, cameras. Elena called again, her voice frantic, begging for help. "Marco's after me too, Nathan. He thinks I set him up. Please." "You did this," I cut her off. "Live with it." I hung up, blocking her number. She'd made her bed, let her lie in it. Rico dug deeper into Marco, uncovering ties to a local syndicate. He wasn't just a thug, he was a hired gun, a problem solver for people with deep pockets. Vince had stumbled into something bigger than himself, dragging Elena, and me, into the crosshairs. Carlos connected me with a guy named Dex, an ex-cop turned fixer who knew Marco's moves. "He's patient," Dex warned over coffee at a diner outside town. "He'll wait, watch, then strike when you're off guard. You want to beat him? Hit first." "How?" I asked, my hands tight around the mug. Dex leaned in, his voice low. "We find his base, his crew. Take the fight to him. I've got intel, he's holed up in a warehouse by the docks. You in?" I nodded. "Set it up." The plan came together fast. Dex mapped the warehouse, Carlos brought muscle, and I brought the will to end this. We hit it at dawn, 6 of us, armed and silent, slipping through the shadows of the industrial sprawl. Marco's crew was small but tough, 5 guys including Vince, who'd somehow wormed his way back into the fold. The fight was brutal, gunfire, fists, blood on the concrete. I took a hit to the shoulder, a grazing shot that burned like hell, but I kept moving. Carlos took down 2, Dex handled another. I found Vince cowering behind a crate, his bravado gone. "Please, Nathan, don't," he begged, hands up. I aimed the gun at his chest, my finger twitching. "You should have stayed gone." But I didn't shoot. I pistol whipped him instead, knocking him out cold. Killing him wouldn't fix this, it'd just haunt me. Marco was the last stand. He fought like a machine, quick, precise, no fear. Carlos and I cornered him near the loading bay, his back to the water. "You're persistent," he said, blood dripping from a cut on his lip. "I'll give you that." "And this," I said, gun raised. Walk away. He smirked. Not my style. He lunged, but Carlos was faster, slamming him with the butt of his shotgun. Marco hit the ground out cold. We tied him up, left him for the cops. Anonymous tip, no trace back to us. The aftermath was quiet. Vince went to jail, assault, robbery, enough to keep him locked up. Elena disappeared. Rumor was she'd fled town, hiding from Marco's shadow. I didn't care to find out. Marco's arrest rattled his bosses and they backed off, for now. Dex warned me they might circle back someday, but I'd be ready. I rebuilt the house, piece by piece, stripping out every trace of Elena. The photos, the furniture, her perfume lingering in the air. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a fortress, a testament to what I'd survived. Carlos became a regular, our bond forged in blood and trust. Dex stayed on call, a shadow ally for whatever came next. One night, months later, I sat on the porch, a beer in hand, the stars bright overhead. The scars, physical and otherwise, were still there, but they didn't weigh me down. Elena had called me boring, predictable. She'd wanted excitement, danger. She got it, and lost everything. Me. I found something else. Strength, control, a life I'd fight for. Marco might come back. Others might try. But I wasn't the man they'd underestimated anymore. I was ready for anything.